Ein was born as a worthless appraiser, and it has led to a life of constant misery. He can barely make a living for himself and is constantly mistreated by those around him. So now that he's on the edge of death's door, he decides to take the plunge and get it over with. A few hours earlier, Ein was in a party with the mage Jolene and the swordsman Zoid. He is currently up against your average New York City rat, and he manages to slash it, but it's not enough to take the rat down, so he yells for Jolene to hurry up with her spell, and once she's finally done, she fires it at the rat, killing it in a single blow. Now that they are done with their battle, Zoid and Jolene begin praising each other for a job well done. However, they are nowhere near as nice when speaking to the appraiser they brought along with them, Ian. Zoid yells for Ein to hurry up and do his job already, but all the heavy baggage he's carrying combined with the weight of their insults makes it difficult to move, so Ein ends up falling face first to the ground. He is clearly being mistreated, but even so he has no choice but to get up and obediently do his job as a low-common appraiser. At birth, all the people in this world are granted jobs by the goddess of light and skills by the goddess of darkness. By honing these skills, one can gain a multitude of abilities and powers. However, jobs are passed down genetically, so they can never be changed. These jobs are divided into tiers: rare, high common, and low common. And as you can see, low common is bronze tier trash, so most people with this class are stuck as peasants or merchants. Ein's parents used to own a small appraisal shop to support the family, but they both tragically died when Ein was young, so he was left to fend for himself. That's how he ended up becoming an unglorified pack mule for these two, and even though he hates working for them, he's got no choice. He uses his appraisal skill on the rat they killed and finds out that it's an F-rank rat, so it's pretty much worthless. Although its tooth is D-rank, so it's valuable enough for Ein to pick up. He tries to pry the rat's mouth open so he can remove the tooth, but that jaw isn't budging, so this is going to take a while. Zoid and Jolene are starting to get impatient since Ein is taking so long, so Ein asks them for a little help so he can get the rat's mouth open quickly. However, Zoid is offended that Ein would even dare to ask for help, so he throws a rock at him and tells Ein that he's worthless. Ein glares at Zoid with rage in his eyes for what he just did, but unfortunately, Ein doesn't have the strength to back that rage, so Zoid just kicks him across the floor and Ein is forced to apologize and beg for mercy. Zoid doesn't feel like beating Ein up anymore, so he gets back to work trying to pry the rat's jaws open, while Jolene and Zoid mock him for being a filthy trash collector. They really enjoyed making fun of him, and they know he can't do anything about it since there aren't any jobs for an appraiser like him. If someone wanted to figure out the value of an item, they could easily go to the guild and have it appraised with a magic item, so low-level appraisers like Ein are totally obsolete. Ein heard everything those two just said about him, and he knows they are right. His appraisal skill is practically worthless, so the only job he can get is scavenging parts for jerks like Jolene and Zoid. As soon as Ein has stored the tooth in his bag, Zoid reminds Ein that the only reason they even agree to have him in their party is because Zoid hates touching gross stuff like that, so he had better learn his place and behave like a good trash boy. Life dealt Ein a bad hand, but he's got to do whatever it takes to survive in this world, even if it means he must suffer at the hands of those two. As they are walking through the dungeon, Zoid happens to spot a hellhound corpse lying in the middle of the path, and he doesn't even question it. He thinks this is incredibly lucky since they can loot it without him having to fight, so he orders Ein to start looting. However, Ein has a functioning brain and raises the good point that if the hellhound was already dead before they got here, then something strong must have killed it. And on top of that, hellhounds aren't even supposed to spawn in this area of the dungeon, so he is sure something is seriously wrong here. However, Zoid doesn't want to hear any logical arguments from a loser like Ein, so he tells him to shut up and get to work already. While Ein does the dirty work, Jolene and Zoid begin talking about getting freaky with each other once they get back to town and maybe forcing Ein to watch. But then they notice a second hellhound corpse in the corridor, so they tell Ein to go get that one too. However, this time, Ein is frozen in fear because according to the guild map he got, there shouldn't be a corridor here, so he has a bad feeling that something is going to go wrong if they keep going. Yet once again, Zoid completely ignores Ein's logical arguments and starts walking into the corridor. He tells Ein that if he's so scared to continue, then he can leave on his own, but he won't be getting paid anymore since he is disobeying an order from the leader. Ein is pretty much cornered here because on one hand, he knows something dangerous might be down in that corridor, so he really doesn't want to go, but he also can't afford to be fired from Zoid's party. There are practically no other parties that would be willing to accept a loser with a skill like appraisal, so if Zoid kicks Ein out because of this, he will have no way of surviving. So Ein eventually decides to head into the corridor with Zoid even though he knows it's a bad idea. After walking through the corridor for a while, they come across a ton of dead hellhounds on the floor, and Zoid thinks they just hit the jackpot since they can loot all these bodies and make a massive profit without having to fight anything, but Ein is still uneasy since whatever killed all these hellhounds might still be around. Zoid is getting sick of all Ein's constant worrying, so he yells at him to shut up and do his job. But then Ein sees something absolutely terrifying behind Zoid, so he nervously points in that direction. Zoid turns around to see dozens of little red eyes staring at them, and a few moments later, a pack of hellhounds emerges from the darkness. All those hellhound bodies they found earlier must have been the result of infighting among the pack, but now that they've been confronted by the full pack, none of them know what to do. Ein has no combat skills, and even if Zoid and Jolene worked together, they would barely be able to take down one hellhound, let alone an entire pack, so fighting isn't an option here. The only way they can make it out of this alive is if they make a run for it, but even if they do try to run away, there's no way they can escape a pack of wolves chasing them down. Just then, Zoid realizes that he and Jolene don't necessarily have to be faster than the hounds, they just have to be faster than Ein, so the hounds eat him first, so he tells Jolene to cast a paralysis spell on him. Jolene is confused at first, but she soon figures out what Zoid is trying to do, so she points her staff at Ein and paralyzes him. Ein falls to the floor, unable to move, and he can't believe that the two of them really plan to leave him here to die. But Zoid assures him that the paralysis only lasts for a short time, so if Ein stays quiet, he might get lucky and escape the hellhounds as well. However, Zoid then proceeds to make a lot of noise to attract the hellhounds straight to Ein, and afterwards he runs off with Jolene, leaving Ein to be eaten. The hellhounds pounce on Ein and immediately bite into his arm and leg, so he screams out in pain. But all the pain from being mauled caused the paralysis to wear off, so Ein can once again move and grabs a nearby rock to get the hellhounds off him. He then throws his backpack at them, and while it may not have done any damage, the food inside the backpack was enough of a distraction to buy him some time, so he slowly limps away from the hounds. But unfortunately, he discovers that Zoid and Jolene had blocked off the exit, so there really is no way for him to escape. He doesn't have much time before the hounds come after him again, so Ein spots another corridor and starts heading straight for it, but to his dismay, this corridor leads to a massive dead end. All hope seems to have been lost for Ein since he has nowhere to run and he can hear the dogs closing in on him by the second. If he is going to die regardless, Ein would rather fall to his death than be eaten alive by those monsters. Till now, he has always blamed his failures on his trash appraisal job, but now he realizes he never actually tried to overcome the challenges he faced because of his job. But even if he realizes that now, it's too late for him to change anything. A loud thud is heard as Ein's body hits the ground, but while he most certainly died on impact, he happened to land right on top of a tree. A beautiful girl appears before him and slowly walks towards his dead body before giving him a kiss on the forehead. As she does this, Ein's body begins to move again, and after a few moments he regains consciousness. Once Ein can think clearly again, he realizes that he's still alive and all his injuries have been healed, so he starts wondering how that could even be possible. He notices drops of water falling on him from the tree, so he catches a few and uses his appraised skill to check them, and to his utter shock, these are S-rank droplets of the World Tree. He then appraises the giant tree, and sure enough, he discovers that this huge hunk of wood is indeed the World Tree of Legend. Long ago, this world had a single World Tree, and this tree was responsible for producing the mana that humans use to create magic. However, the legend also states that the World Tree withered away and died long ago, but many scholars of the world theorize that it must still exist somewhere in the world, which is why massive expeditions were launched in hopes of finding it. But the tree was never found, although it makes sense why no one ever found it, because who would think to search at the bottom of the dungeon? He realizes that the tree must have brought him back to life, so he thanks it, and as he does so, he hears a girl's voice, but there's clearly no one else here, so it must have been his imagination. Moving on, Ein is glad he survived the fall, and this place seems pretty safe since there are no monsters here, but he needs to think about how he's going to get himself back to the surface. Zoid and Jolene obviously aren't going to call anyone to save Ein, plus there's no food here, so he will starve if he doesn't make it back home soon. He heads for the exit, but before he leaves, he once again thanks the tree for saving him. This place obviously isn't on the guild map, so Ein has no idea what to expect from this place. The enemies here are bound to be stronger than those hellhounds that nearly killed him, so he's scared, but he has no choice but to go. He's done making excuses for himself and plans to do whatever it takes to survive, no matter how hard it may be. Ein walks out into the dungeon, but to his surprise, he's been walking for a while now, and there are still no signs of any monsters. He's honestly relieved since that means he won't have to fight, but suddenly Ein feels a gust of wind near his face, and in the next moment, his ear is on the floor. He screams out in pain and tries reaching for his severed ear, but in the process, 2 of his fingers get cut off. The one behind Ein's suffering is this S-rank gremlin, and Ein is starting to really panic since even those hellhounds were only B-rank, so he stands no chance against this thing. The gremlin begins slicing Ein up, and it's way too fast for Ein to even react, so his only choice is to flee. However, as he attempts to get away, the gremlin raises its scythe to stab Ein through the chest, but before it does, it freezes in its tracks because something even more terrifying just appeared. The gremlin gets squished to death by a massive death bear, and if Ein didn't stand a chance against the gremlin, then he most certainly isn't surviving the death bear. The bear slashes Ein's face with its claws, destroying one of his eyes in the process, and while Ein is trying to crawl away, it picks him up and begins squeezing until blood gushes out of his mouth. The death bear was just about to eat him, but at the last second, it gets decapitated by a grumpy woman. She hates the fact that she just saved a human, but that girl kept begging her to help him, so she didn't have much of a choice. And he is once again shocked to find that his wounds have been healed, and as he sits up, he sees that girl from before sitting across from him. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.